I was sitting in the back of the courtroom when the judge looked over his glasses and said, "Melissa Grant, this court finds you guilty on all counts." And I swear the whole room stopped breathing for a second, because this was the same woman who once threatened to put a lien on my home over a rusty pickup truck and a fence post, the same woman who taped a $300 fine to my gate like I was some kind of problem she needed to eliminate. As the bailiff reached for the cuffs, she turned around, eyes wide, searching the room like somebody was going to stand up and save her. And nobody. Did not one neighbor, not one board member. And I just sat there, thinking this all started with a piece of paper stuck to my own front gate on land my family had worked for generations. My name is Luke Harper, and if you'd told me a couple years ago that I'd end up owning every road, every park, every fancy little clubhouse in a gated community that hated my guts, I would have laughed in your face. But here we are. Back then, I was just a burned-out office guy who got lucky in a sad kind of way. My grandpa Roy passed and left me. Harper Ranch, a stretch of about 800 acres in Redstone County. And after too many years breathing recycled office air and begging middle managers for PTO, I packed what I had into an old blue Ford and drove toward what I thought would be peace and quiet. The ranch had always been my safe place growing up. Dusty sunlight through the barn boards, coffee on the porch at 5 a.m. The kind of silence where you can hear your own thoughts again. And I honestly believed my biggest problems were going to be broken fences and stubborn cows, not a homeowners association with more ego than sense. Right in the middle of our land sat Cedar Ridge Reserve, this shiny gated community with a stone entrance and a sign that looked like it belonged on a magazine cover. Luxury living in the heart of nature. You know the type. When I was a kid, there were just a handful of modest houses there, but somewhere between then and now, it had transformed into a full-blown HOA kingdom with matching mailboxes and newsletter drama. I met their self-appointed queen on my second day back at the ranch. I was driving down the paved road that cuts through Cedar Ridge, hauling tools in the back of my truck, when a white Lexus eased right into my lane and stopped like a barrier. And out stepped this woman in a tennis skirt and a perfect ponytail clipboard tucked under her arm like it was a badge. She waved a manicured hand at my truck like it smelled bad. "Excuse me, sir. Commercial vehicles aren't permitted in Cedar Ridge. You'll need to turn around and exit the neighborhood," she said, like she was talking to a delivery guy who got the wrong address. I turned the radio down and tried to play nice. "Ma'am, I'm not a contractor. I live here. My driveway's at the end of this road. Old farmhouse. Big red barn, been here longer than this pavement," and I gave her a polite smile. She didn't even look. The old farmhouse is adjacent to the association, but this road is HOA maintained. That vehicle is not on the approved list, and it is a visual nuisance. "I can issue a citation right now," she replied, and she already had her pen out. "It's a 20-year-old Ford, not a circus truck," I said, half joking, half annoyed. "My name is Melissa Grant. I'm president of the Cedar Ridge Reserve Homeowners Association. And when I say something is out of compliance, it is out of compliance," she shot back, scribbled on her little pad. Tore off the notice and shoved it into my hand like she was dropping a ticket on a windshield. "Unauthorized commercial vehicle. Failure to pay may result in lien activity." I drove around her, told myself it was a weird misunderstanding and that grown adults didn't really behave like HOA memes in real life. Yeah, that was cute. A few days later, I was out behind the barn, sweat dripping into my eyes, driving a new post into the ground where some deer had wrecked the fence, and I heard fast footsteps on grass, and that same sharp voice. "Sir, you need to stop what you're doing right now." And there she was again, phone held up already recording like she'd been waiting for this. "This is a protected greenbelt. You're damaging HOA property." "I'm documenting this for the sheriff," she announced. I leaned on the post driver, catching my breath, and just looked at her for a second. "Melissa, this is my pasture. That fence line is literally the property line Harper Ranch on this side. Your world on that side," I said. Slowly, like maybe if I spoke gently, the logic would sink in. She shook her head like I was a child. "I have the surveys. This is designated common area. You are trespassing. Expect another violation notice," she said, and walked off like she'd just done the community a favor. That night, I sat at my grandpa's old kitchen table with 2 bright pieces of paper in front of me, fines totaling more than my monthly truck payment, and I felt this mix of anger and disbelief rolling around in my chest. That's when I called Patterson, the family lawyer who'd handled our stuff since before I was born. The next morning, I was in his cramped office that smelled like old paper and coffee, telling him about the citations. The greenbelt, the whole thing. And he just listened with this tired little smile, like he'd been expecting this call. "Your granddad told me this might happen," he said, finally. Reaching into a drawer and pulling out a thick yellowed folder, told me to keep this handy. He laid out a document on the desk, the paper fragile, typed on an old typewriter, signatures along the bottom that matched the names on the photographs hanging in my grandparents' hallway. "This is a 75-year ground lease," he explained, tapping the date at the top. "Back in the 50s, your great-grandfather leased about 60 acres in the middle of the ranch to a developer. They built Cedar Ridge on it. Houses, streets. Park clubhouse, all of it on leased land. The houses sit on separate lots. Folks own those, but the roads, the green spaces, the clubhouse, the pool. That's the common ground, and that stayed under this lease. Lease expired this spring. No renewal on record." I stared at the expiration date, did the math in my head, felt my stomach drop a little. "So, right now," he shrugged in that lawyer way. "We sent certified letters to the HOA board and their management company a year before expiration, then 6 months, then 90 days. We have signed green cards showing somebody at their office signed for every one of them. Nobody responded. Nobody recorded a new lease or a purchase. Legally, when that lease expired, all that common ground reverted to Harper Ranch. When Ms. Grant says you're standing in her greenbelt, she is physically standing on your dirt," he said. And he did not look like a man guessing. Driving back through the stone gate after that felt different. Same fountain, same manicured shrubs. But now, every foot of that pavement felt like it was laid over my granddad's calloused hands. And I felt this weird mix of power and dread, like holding a loaded weapon you never asked for. I still tried to go the neighborly route. With Patterson's help, I sent a letter to the Cedar Ridge board, explaining the situation in plain language, attaching copies of the lease and the county records offering to sell them the common ground at fair market value, or sign a brand new long-term lease, even suggested sitting down over coffee to hash it out. Like adults. Their response, a fluorescent orange violation notice taped right to my front gate, unapproved gate, $300. The unapproved gate was the same metal gate that had hung there since I was a kid. The one my grandpa used to swing open at dawn every day. Under comments, someone had written, "Creates hostile atmosphere. For residents must be removed." I stood there with that paper fluttering in the morning breeze, and thought about what my neighbor Gil had told me the week before about a widow Miss Helen on Maple Lane who lost her home because her rose garden wasn't on the approved plant list. How Melissa had driven fines up. Then the HOA slapped a lien on the house, and some shell company bought it at auction. And now Melissa's cousin was renting it out for double the mortgage the poor woman had paid for 30 years. At some point, you stop telling yourself it's just a misunderstanding, and you admit you're dealing with a bully. That weekend, I bought a truckload of fence posts, rolls of wire, and a stack of simple wooden signs. Then I followed the survey stakes Patterson had highlighted and ran a new fence on both sides of the road, from the county highway all the way to the end of Cedar Ridge. Post by post, blister by blister, hanging signs that said, Harper Ranch boundary every few yards, so there was no confusion. At the stone entrance right next to the Cedar Ridge Reserve, residents only. Monument, I installed a second small gate where my gravel drive met their pretty asphalt and hung a hand-carved board that simply said, Harper Ranch. I did not lock it. I honestly didn't want to block anyone. I just wanted the line to be visible. Wanted it impossible for anyone to pretend they didn't know whose land they were on. It took less than 24 hours for Melissa to blow a gasket. Gil texted me a screenshot from the official HOA Facebook group. Melissa calling me a hostile land baron, telling everyone I was planning to put in a truck stop, maybe a pig farm, and that she and the board would be taking decisive action to protect the community. And if you've ever seen someone weaponize fear in a Facebook group, you know exactly how fast that poison spreads. I knew enough to expect visitors, so I made sure my gate camera was working battery-charged feed linked to my phone. A little before midnight, that white Lexus appeared at the entrance along with a pickup, and I watched on the live feed as Melissa climbed out, arms crossed like a movie villain, while two big guys in Cedar Ridge polos hopped from the truck, one carrying bolt cutters the size of a small child. By the time I walked down the drive, they were rattling my chain like kids caught sneaking out. Evening fellas doing some late-night yard work, I asked. Keeping my voice steady, Melissa spun around, eyes full of fury. Mr. Harper, you are illegally restricting access to a private road. We are removing this barrier immediately, she declared. I pointed at the gate. It isn't locked, Melissa. You could just swing it open. You're standing on my driveway. This chain is here to keep my cows and not your BMWs out. If your friend cuts that chain, that's destruction of private property on camera. The bigger guy stepped right into my space. Chest puffed, breath heavy with beer. You don't tell us what to do in our neighborhood, he said, jabbing a finger at my chest. We run this place. My heart was racing, but I heard my own voice coming out calm. You're standing on Harper Ranch, I said quietly. Go pull the plat map if you don't believe me. He shoved me hard enough to rock me back a couple steps. Careful, old man. It's dark out here. He sneered. Part of me wanted to walk away, but there's a line you don't let people cross on your own land. When he came in with a big sloppy punch, I stepped aside and gave him one short shot to the gut, like my grandpa had taught me, and he folded like a lawn chair, gasping on the pavement. His buddy froze. Melissa started screaming that I had attacked HOA volunteers and that she had everything on video and would see me in jail. I just pointed at the little red light on my own camera and said, So do I. The deputy who came out in the morning watched the whole thing on my laptop, from the bolt cutters, to the shove, to the swing. Then he handed the USB back and sighed like a man who already had Melissa on speed dial. I'm closing her assault complaint, he said. But fair warning, she's telling everybody you're dangerous and planning to bulldoze the neighborhood. And that was the moment I realized this wasn't going to be solved with one stern letter and a handshake. When people like Melissa lose control, they go straight for fear, and she had an entire neighborhood wired into her little power grid. You know what I mean? In that HOA Facebook group, she painted me as some predatory developer from the city who'd inherited the ranch and was drooling to throw up gas pumps and chain stores. She told people their access could be cut off, that I was threatening to block the only road. In that only she and the board stood between them and disaster. Folks were terrified, and I don't blame them. Their houses were there. Retirement, everything they had. And all they understood was that some guy with a beat-up truck and a piece of paper could supposedly ruin their lives. I couldn't fight that one rumor at a time that would have been like trying to mop up a flood with a napkin, so Patterson and I decided to change the venue. We rented the county community hall and sent every homeowner a certified letter, not from Luke the scary rancher, but from Patterson's law firm, inviting them to a meeting about their property titles and road access rights. The language was dry and heavy and very intentional, the kind of thing that makes mortgage holders sit up straight. On the night of the meeting, the hall was packed. People clutching letters, whispering. Shooting me looks like I was the villain. In a small-town play, Melissa and her board planted in the front row. Arms crossed, trying to radiate control. I stayed in the back. Patterson stepped up to the microphone, clicked on the projector, and put up the county survey map. Big red outline around Harper Ranch, then overlaid the Cedar Ridge plat right in the middle, so folks could see their own cul-de-sacs and little curved streets drawn inside that border. You could feel the air change like the first drop in a roller coaster. Then he put the lease on the screen, pointed to the paragraph that said, "When it expired without renewal, possession of the common property reverts to the underlying fee owner," and read the expiration date out loud. A woman about my mom's age stood up and said, "Why didn't we know about this? Why didn't the board tell us we were on a clock?" Patterson didn't answer her directly. He clicked to the next slide. An email from 2 years earlier from the original developer's lawyer, addressed to Melissa Grant, President, Cedar Ridge Reserve, HOA, warning that the ground lease was expiring in 24 months and recommending the board begin financial planning to buy or renew it. Then he put up a pair of bank statements from the HOA reserve account, one showing a healthy balance, the next showing a $50,000 withdrawal, labeled Special Legal Contingency, paid to a consulting firm tied to Melissa's brother-in-law, a firm that closed quietly a few months later. People started talking over each other, half accusing, half panicking. A younger couple in the back read along as Patterson showed an email where a realtor asked Melissa for proof the HOA owned the roads and common areas outright, and Melissa replied, "Association owns all common property free and clear. It's a non-issue." And I watched their faces go from confused to sick as they realized their title might be sitting on a lie. That was the twist for the neighborhood. In about 20 minutes, I went from monster at the gate to guy holding the receipts, and Melissa went from guardian of standards to person who took their money and hid the truth. You'd think that kind of public exposure would make a person step back, call a lawyer, maybe try to negotiate. But Melissa wasn't built like that. When narcissists get cornered, they don't apologize. They double down. A few weeks after the meeting, Gil called me late one night and said, "Luke, there's a black pickup at Melissa's again, 3rd time this week. Big guy, lots of tattoos." She just handed him an envelope that wasn't thin, and my stomach did that slow sink again. I hoped it was just some PI she'd hired to dig for dirt on me, until my gate camera sent a motion alert at 12:30 a.m. 2 taps, and there it was on my phone. Night vision, green, a guy slipping through a weak spot in my fence with a gas can in one hand, looking straight toward the old wooden equipment shed, where I kept hay and some of my grandpa's tools. I don't know how to explain the calm that comes over you when your brain realizes something is very wrong. I grabbed the shotgun from behind the door and moved through the dark like I'd been doing it all my life. I let him get close enough to the shed that there was no story he could tell about just passing through, and then I stepped out, where he could see the barrel. "That's far enough," I said, and my voice didn't even crack. He froze, turned, and gave me this little smirk, the kind of guy who has seen a lot of people bluff. "Relax, man. I'm just cutting across," he said. I nodded at the can, with gasoline at midnight toward my building full of dry wood. "Sure," I said. He shrugged like it was a joke. "You're not gonna shoot me. You know what happens to people who shoot somebody in the back." "Good thing I'm standing in front of you," I answered. "And good thing we have a sheriff in this county because this is my land, and you're here with a gas can. And if I call him right now, you're going to have a long night either way. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to drop the can. Get on your knees, hands on your head, and we'll let the law sort out who sent you." We stared at each other in that cold little bubble for a few seconds. That felt like a year, then he broke eye contact first, dropped the can, and slowly sank to his knees. The deputies had him cuffed and in the back of a cruiser 20 minutes later. And to no one's surprise, a guy with priors for intimidation and arson for hire decided pretty quickly that his loyalty didn't extend to taking all the blame. He told them Melissa had hired him, said she was angry and scared, and wanted my shed gone to send a message. Maybe make me think twice about pursuing the land claim. After they arrested her at dawn in her robe, with the whole neighborhood peeking through blinds, things moved fast. The homeowners recalled her dissolved the HOA and came to me as a group to negotiate a simple road and utility easement so their world wouldn't literally shut off in 30 days. They asked if I'd buy the clubhouse and pool to help cover the legal mess. I paid exactly $50,000 for it, told them to use the money to start fixing what had been broken, especially for people like Miss Helen. The clubhouse became a public community center. The pool turned into a $3 day pass spot where kids from town and ranch families all splashed together. Nobody checking whether your cooler was approved. Nobody measuring the shade of your pool chair. And then there was the criminal trial, which brings us back to that courtroom where this story opened. The prosecutor laid out the missing HOA money. The fake assurances to buyers, the texts and calls to the guy with the gas can. And Melissa tried to sit there like a misunderstood volunteer who just made some mistakes. But under pressure, she cracked, raised her voice at the prosecutor, snapped at former neighbors. When they testified until the jury didn't see a victim, they saw exactly who she'd been all along. They came back with guilty on every count, and when the judge sentenced her to several years plus restitution, she looked around like the world had gone insane for actually holding her accountable. Sitting in the back row in my clean shirt and dusty boots, watching the bailiff lead her away, I didn't feel fireworks or some big cinematic victory. I just felt like a long, ugly chapter had finally closed. Like I could go back to worrying about broken fences and calves in the wrong pasture instead of legal briefs and Facebook hate threads. Still, even now, some nights on that porch, when the sky is too quiet, I look out toward the faint glow of Cedar Ridge and wonder if I went too far. If using every legal advantage of that old lease made me just as ruthless as the woman I took down, or if sometimes the only way to stop people who abuse power is to hit them with the one thing they can't talk their way around. Consequences written in black and white. That's where you come in. If you've ever dealt with a boss, a board, an HOA, anyone who used rules as a weapon to push people around, I want to hear what you think. Was I right to fight back the way I did? Or should I have taken a softer route? Even after the gas can, the lies, the stolen homes, tell me in the comments. If you think I was the hero, the villain, or something messy in between, and if this story reminded you of your own crazy HOA drama or power trip nightmare, share it below, because you'd be surprised how many of us are living versions of the same story. And if you want more real talk like this, messy, honest, a little bit petty, but a lot about justice, hit like, subscribe, and send this video to that one friend who always says, "You won't believe what my HOA just did." Because yeah, we will.